The temple doors closed behind the trembling youth, and the sound echoed like the strike of a judge's hammer. The walls inside were heavy with smoke, and the air carried the smell of burning oils. The priests moved in silence, their faces stern. Their eyes sharp, fixed on the boy who had been chosen. He had no escape. The city outside whispered of glory and divine order, but inside these walls there was fear. There was a price every man whispered about, yet no one dared speak aloud. The price of purity, the cost of being marked as untouched. Babylon was a city of gods. Its temples rose high with ziggurats scraping the sky, and at the center of power stood the priests, men who claimed to speak for the gods, men who controlled every breath of daily life. And the fear they spread was not only with words, it was carved into the flesh of those who dared to be different. The virgins among men, those who had never known a woman, were said to carry a special power, a purity that the priests could twist into sacrifice. Rumors spread through the narrow streets at night, stories of young men dragged to the temples, stories of their cries swallowed by thick stone walls, stories of punishments that no mother wished to imagine, but fear bound. Their tongues' silence chained the people. The gods demanded obedience, and the priests ensured it not through prayer, but through cruelty, through acts that stripped men of dignity, through rituals that turned human life into a spectacle of torment. Boy, now on his knees, felt the grip of two strong arms pulling him closer to the altar. His body shook, his teeth rattled, his mind screamed, but he could not fight the moment he stepped into the temple. He belonged to them, and what awaited him was beyond understanding, a ritual no one outside these walls ever saw, yet its shadow haunted the entire city. Babylon thrived with riches, with trade, with armies, yet its foundation was built not only on stone and brick, but on fear, on secrets, and on punishments so dark they are spoken of even now. The story of these punishments is not just a tale of cruelty, it is a mirror to the darker side of civilization, where power wears the mask of faith, and where human suffering is turned into divine. In order to understand the terror, we must step back into the heart of Babylon, a city that grew along the banks of the Euphrates. Its walls so tall that even armies trembled, its gates decorated with lions, dragons, and bulls, each one a symbol of power. Yet behind these grand walls, life was ruled by the gods, or more accurately by the priests who claimed to interpret their will. Religion in Babylon was not separate from law or government. It was the government, the priesthood dictated, justice controlled. Wealth and guided kings, priests told farmers when to plant, merchants when to trade, and generals when to fight. They were the voice of Marduk, Ishtar, and Enlil. Their words were law, written in stone tablets and sealed in rituals of fire. Among their many duties, one stands out as the most chilling. They were keepers of purity, but purity in their hands did not mean holiness. It meant control. Men who were untouched by women were marked by superstition. Some believed they carried hidden power. Others believed their purity insulted the gods. Whichever story was true, the priests turned it into an excuse to dominate. The temple was not only a place of prayer, it was a stage for power, a place where human bodies were offered up to remind the people of their place. Some rituals honored gods with food or incense, others demanded blood, and when the priests chose a male virgin, he became both symbol and sacrifice. His body used to demonstrate the authority of gods through acts of punishment that broke both flesh and spirit. The world outside saw Babylon as a jewel of civilization with hanging gardens, trade routes, and art, but the hidden side was soaked in cruelty. The punishments were whispered in fear by travelers who passed through the city. Some never dared to repeat them fully. They would only say Babylon was a place where the body of a man could be taken in the name of a god, and no one could stop it. Priests used secrecy as their weapon. They veiled their punishments as divine. Tests, they told the people that gods demanded the pain of the untouched, that the screams rising from temple walls were offerings accepted by heaven. And so the city bowed its head, men and women alike, convinced that to resist would be to resist. The gods themselves, this blending of belief and cruelty, shows the darkest edge of history, the power to turn faith into fear, the ability to sanctify suffering and to call torment divine. The punishments inflicted on virgins inside Babylonian temples were varied, each designed not just to hurt, but to humiliate the priests, believed that breaking the body was only half of the ritual, the other half was crushing the spirit. One punishment involved binding the young man to the altar, his hands stretched, his legs locked so he could not move. The priests would then cut shallow lines across his skin, not deep enough to kill, but enough to draw blood. The blood was collected in bowls mixed with wine and declared a sacred drink, each drop seen as proof that purity had been given to the gods. The boy would remain bound sometimes for hours, his body growing weak as chants filled the chamber. Another punishment was even darker. The virgin was forced to kneel before the sacred statue, while the priests struck his back with rods, each strike, timed to chants each cry, seen as music to the gods. The blows continued until the boy collapsed. Sometimes they revived him with cold water, only to begin again. This was not discipline, it was a ritual of degradation. Every strike a reminder that his body was not his own. The most feared punishment, however, was one no man dared to describe in detail in whispers. It was said that priests used instruments heated by fire, pressing them against the most vulnerable. Parts of the boy's body, not to kill, but to scar, to mark him forever as a vessel of divine wrath. This was called purification, though nothing about it was pure. Once branded, the virgin would never again be whole. He would walk the streets in shame, his scars visible, his dignity stripped, and the people would see him as cursed. These acts were not rare. They were repeated to remind Babylon, who truly held power. Every scream carried through stone halls into the city outside, every mother clutching. Her son prayed that he would never be chosen. Every father lowered his eyes, knowing he was powerless. Priests used these punishments as a theater of fear, their cruelty, a performance that kept the city obedient. And yet, even within this darkness there were whispers of rebellion. Travelers from far lands wrote of Babylon not only as a city of wonders, but as a city cursed by its own faith. Some claimed that gods themselves would one day strike down those who used their names to spread cruelty. But until that day came, the punishments continued echoing through the ages as proof of what happens when faith is twisted into a weapon. Imagine being that boy. Imagine the temple walls towering over you, the chants echoing your body, tied your voice, silenced by fear, every strike, every cut, every burn, not only hurting your skin, but burning into your soul. What would such terror do to a person? How would they ever return to life outside? For many victims, there was no return. They carried the scars on their bodies and deeper scars in their minds. Some never spoke again. Some avoided the eyes of neighbors. Some vanished into the shadows of the city, broken men who had been turned into warnings, their suffering a silent reminder to all who saw. Them families lived in fear every time the temple messengers walked the streets. Mothers clutched their sons. Fathers avoided their gaze because to be chosen meant doom. Some prayed desperately to other gods. Some even tried to hide their children. But the priests always found them. The ritual demanded bodies, and the city was too afraid to resist. The cruelty reached beyond the victims. It poisoned the soul of Babylon itself for every scream that rose from the temple. Another stone of fear was laid in the hearts of the people when cruelty becomes law, when suffering is called holy society itself is wounded. This is why these stories matter even today, because they reveal how power unchecked can twist faith into chains, how leaders claiming divine will can turn temples into prisons, how silence can feed cruelty until it becomes unstoppable. When we look at Babylon's greatness, we must also look at its shadows. The hanging gardens may have lifted green beauty into the sky, but beneath those gardens, the earth drank blood, and the cries of virgins filled the night. This is the other side of civilization, the side we often turn away from, yet the side we must confront to understand the cost of power. The story of punishments, Babylonian, and priests inflicted on virgins is more than ancient history. It is a lesson that echoes across time. It shows us how faith can be corrupted, how rituals can be used not to uplift, but to enslave, how leaders can twist belief into terror. When we think of Babylon, we imagine splendor. We imagine towers rising into the clouds. We imagine wealth and beauty. But the truth hides beneath the stones, beneath the chants, beneath the rituals. Splendor was built on fear, wealth on blood, beauty on suffering. The priests stood as symbols of power, but their hands were stained with cruelty. What happened to those virgins should not be forgotten, because forgetting means allowing such cruelty to repeat. History is full of examples where leaders cloaked themselves in religion or ideology to justify acts beyond reason, where innocence was destroyed in the name of order. The story of Babylon is one warning among many. The lesson is clear: power must always be questioned. No ritual, no authority, no leader should be allowed to turn suffering into law. The cries of those boys, though silenced long ago, remind us that human dignity is fragile, that it can be stolen when people surrender their voices when they bow too deeply to fear. So as we close this journey into the shadows of Babylon, let us carry the light of awareness. Let us remember that civilization is not only measured by its towers or gardens, but by how it treats its weakest, its most vulnerable. May their suffering remind us to guard against cruelty and to stand against those who would sanctify pain. Do not let their cries be forgotten. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so that these stories reach more people, and so that together we continue uncovering the dark truths of history.